Hello, my name is Darren Thomas and I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. In this particular video, we're going to be taking a look at behavioral self-management with students. So in other words, teaching students how to manage and control themselves and their own behavior. So let's go ahead and see what we can learn. All right, there are several different approaches to how you can help students to learn how to monitor and to control their own behavior. And you can see them on the screen. Self-monitoring, self-evaluation, and/or self-reinforcement. Now, these can work together in steps or they can work individually, and it all depends on the student that you are working with. In this video right here, we're going to consider them steps. Now, self-monitoring has to do with defining the unacceptable behavior. So you have a student who is doing something that is not appreciated, that maybe is considered inappropriate. And so you can tell the student directly, but that doesn't help them to go through the thought process. An alternative that many consider to be better is to ask the students questions. So let's consider as an example that maybe the student is talking and being disruptive in class. So you might want to ask the student, is talking disruptive? Now, you're probably going to get, a sharp response and they're going to say no or whatever. And so you have to look past that because you're trying to get the student to go through the thought process of realizing how their behavior is wrong and what they need to do to fix it. And so, yes, they might be smart with you and maybe even disrespectful in their response, but this is a first step that starts to plant a seed for them to realize that what they are doing is wrong. The next step is called self-evaluation, and this involves the student defining. Now notice how it's not the teacher defining. It is the student who is defining what is acceptable behavior. And so you're beginning to shift from discovering what the problem is to looking at ways to solve this problem, shifting towards implementation. So going back to the example of the student who was talking out of turn at the wrong time, once they realize that, talking is a problem, they need to realize, well, what do I do about my talking? And in the example, it would be to stop talking. Again, students do not want to often recognize that what they are doing is wrong because then they have to realize they have to change. So there will be some resistance from many students in terms of going through this process. But again, if you want to implement these behavior self-management steps, you have to try to go through this process and keep your cool as the student resists. The final step here is going to be self-reinforcement. And this is where you focus on the new behavior. And so the student has to choose their reinforcement. Again, reinforcement will either encourage a behavior or discourage a behavior. And so continuing with the example of the student who was talking out of turn, talking too much, a positive reinforcement might be, as an example, more free time. So in other words, this will encourage it because, they've done the desired behavior. A negative reinforcement, something that will try to extinguish the behavior, might be no free time. And so as the student is losing this free time, they realize that, oh man, I better stop talking. And so again, notice the emphasis on the student choosing something. So in each of these steps we talked about, the student realizes what the problem is, the student realizes what they need to do, and then the student realizes what kind of rewards, if you will, or reinforcement that they desire. So at every step of this process, the student is in control of what they will do in many ways because they are the ones deciding this as they try to modify their behavior that is unacceptable. Now, there are a few other things that we have to keep in mind when we are trying to go through this process. And the first one is called circumstantial cues. These are things in the environment or the context that will help or hinder the behavior modification. So, for example, some things that might help a student to stop talking, if we will, is maybe to separate them from other students so that they're not distracted. Something that might hurt is if you put a talkative student next to their best friend. So that's a circumstantial cue that'll make it harder to modify the behavior. Whereas if you remove or separate them, this is a circumstantial cue that will encourage them to modify their behavior. And there are also two different tools at least that you can use to help students, or students can use to help them to achieve their change in behavior. One is self-talk. That's the first one there. And that is where the student says positive words to themselves to encourage them that they are able to accomplish and to achieve whatever it is they're doing. So they can say things to themselves: I can do this. This is possible. I know that I can stop talking. I can handle this. That's an example of self-talk. Rehearsal, which is the last bullet on our screen, is happening when the student is visualizing in their mind what the desired behavior is. They're thinking about it. They're trying to picture themselves doing it. And so again, by putting this inside their mind's eye, if you will, it helps them to achieve it. And so these are two different tools that you can provide students so that they are able to focus on changing their behavior. Now, as a review, behavior self-management is about empowering the student to monitor, evaluate, and reinforce the desired behavior. At each step of this process, the student must be the one that is kind of in control of determining what the problem is, how they're going to solve it, and how they're going to reward or punish this particular behavior that they're trying to grow. Lastly, there are also cues and strategies that you can use or that you can provide the students to help them with this. So circumstantial cues involves trying to put the student in the right situation so that they can have success in monitoring their behavior. And of course, strategies can include self-talk and rehearsal. So, my name is Darren Thomas. I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. Thank you so much for listening, and you take care.